Okay, hi YouTube. Today we're going to be discussing this book, Evil Intentions, and it's by Ronald J. Watkins. Uh, this is the book. If you follow the Crowley case, you'll know that there was a particular group. Thank God they've now disbanded and gone their separate ways, but they were writing this because at the time I was doing research to write a book about the case because the men involved in this book had requested that I write their side of the story. So anyway, the people involved are writing him saying, "Did she help you write your book?" Oh my God, I never said I helped write this book. I didn't do anything with this book. In fact, I don't even like this book. Why? Because I've read all of the documents in the case. I've interviewed two of the men that are discussed in here. The third one, I wouldn't even give the time of day to, Jesse Gillies. He's now deceased. He was put to death. Actually, he had the death penalty, and he finally was put to death. Mike Logan, the other one. So this book covers mostly Suzanne Rosetti's crime, the one that Jesse and Mike committed, but it also does touch on John Robert Logan, who had also killed a woman by the name of Susan. But anyway, this at the time when this crime occurred, this happened in Arizona. This woman, Suzanne, had stopped at a gas station. She went to fill up her gas tank, locked her keys in the car. Jesse and Mike were sitting outside of the gas station wanting beer, but they couldn't afford any. So they're sitting outside watching her. And she asks them for help. And then when they get the car open for her, she's like, "Okay, how can I repay you?" And they said, "Hey, go buy us some beer and we'll call it even." So she went inside the store, she purchases the beer. Now, this is the story from Mike Logan's perspective. Some of this is in here. A lot of what this guy says is made up, drama, whatever you want to call it. It's like what we would call clickbait today. It's not even true. Didn't happen. It's just his vision of what he thinks happened. Didn't happen. Again, would Mike Logan lie? Sure. But a lot of the stuff that Mike says was backed up by the court documents, which tells me he did not read all of the court documents. Anyway, so as the story goes on, which this book does cover, and the reason why I'm talking about the book Evil Intentions right now, because it's really the only book out there that's discussing the case. It was covered on the Geraldo Rivera show at one point, but even Geraldo didn't even have it all correct, of course. And, but anyway, as the story goes, so she goes and she buys them the beer. She comes back to, her car and she's like, "Here you go, here's a beer, thanks." And they're standing there. And then she goes to get into her vehicle, and when she turned her back on them, Jesse grabs her, hits her, and then throws her in the back of the car. Mike then gets in the back with her. Jesse is now driving them all around town. They end up somewhere. Jesse assaults her. Mike is in the back watching it all. Just doesn't really care. He doesn't do anything to stop it, doesn't care. And eventually they end up at her house. They go to her bank, try to steal her money. Then they end up at her apartment, and Jesse assaults her again. And then they get back in the vehicle, driving around again. This poor girl endured hell. And when she is assaulted for a third time, Jesse's like trying to encourage Mike, "Okay, hey, why don't you try?" Mike, take a turn or whatever, then Mike tries and he can't because he's so high. He's so drunk and he's so high, he can't do anything. So he gets angry. Then they decide to take this poor woman out to the superstitious mountains. Superstition mountains, I think. Um, and and anyway, I mean, she endures, like I said, hell, pure hell. Okay, for an example, they're saying this guy writes, they bound her hands to her feet and threw a blanket she kept in the car over her. Gillies took the wheel. Logan sat in the rear seat with his left hand pressing down on Suzanne. He told her to keep her mouth shut or things would get worse. That never happened. Again, just, like clickbait drama trying to get people, I guess, to like his book. I don't know what the heck this dude was thinking. And then it says, another part, Logan repeatedly asked him what they were going to do with the woman. Gillies did not understand what he meant. At around the time Peter and Louise, her parents, canceled their flight, Gillies finally comprehended Logan's intent. Really? All made up, completely made up. He has no idea what was going on. And then further down, he's like, the booze and marijuana were gone. Gillies and Logan were tired and experiencing a mild depression after the alcohol and drugs. No. They were high the entire time. They didn't come down until like the next day, according to Mike. Mike's like, nah, we just kept it going, man. They stayed high. And then it gets to the part where poor Suzanne says, I guess you're going to kill me now. Now, she did say, according to Mike, she did say that. And then instead of answering, Gillies threw her on the road and then assaulted her again. So I won't read what he says happened. And again, I want to know how this guy, A, could write this, and B, how did he get this information? Gillies didn't talk. As far as I know, he never talked. He was just mad because he got caught and was sentenced to death for the crime. Mike never talked to anybody. So, again, this is why I'm so frustrated with this book. It's just filled with a bunch of fabrication. And then it says they were walking, whatever, making her hike. And then it says there's a break in the guardrail and Gilly stood with 1 foot off the road. No, he didn't. It was nearly 4 a.m. and it was very dark below. It looked as if the cliff fell for thousands of feet into an abyss. No. Mike said they knew it was about a 40-foot drop, 30 to 40-foot drop. It says she was struggling to get away from Gillies, but he held her wrist. Then Logan grabbed her from behind and pushed her toward the cliff, where the men locked eyes in mutual agreement. I don't want to laugh because the crime is so horrendous, but again, that's not what happened. And then it says that she was begging them to stop. That, according to Mike, that didn't occur. They just took her out there. They found a place. They'd been driving up and down. They found a spot, stopped, pulled her out the car, and Jesse took her and threw her. Then they did hike down because they heard her moaning. According to Mike, now you have to understand, I interviewed Mike. I think I drove out there 2 or 3 times when he was in prison in Arizona. Again, now Mike has since passed away. He had MS, and he has since succumbed to the disease, and he passed away several years ago now. But now he says, again, the men debated what to do as they stood over her. Suzanne tried to rise, and Logan told her more than once to stay put. None of that happened. By the time she was thrown over the cliff and she landed, she couldn't move. she Mike said that she was just laying there and it was obvious she was in bad shape. Um, and then um, she did say she wants to go home. I just want to go home. Leave me alone. I'm going to die anyway. And then they have Gilly stating, "You damn right you are the B word." Um, Now, knowing Jesse Gillies the way I do, and I only know him due to correspondence and papers he's written, I have a story that man wrote. And so that sounds like something he would say. And so I kind of, maybe he probably did say that because he had no feelings toward her whatsoever. He just, hey, I did what I did and I got your money, got your car, and you can die now. That was his thought. And then they're talking, he goes on later to say an inmate at the county jail named Ronald Winkle, who was pending extradition to Florida, contacted the public defender's office saying he had information in which they might be interested. And then he said he'd been Mike Logan's cellmate for 2 or 3 days and had discussed the case while they were together. I will tell you right now, that did not happen at all. Mike never talked about this case to anybody. Nobody. Not even when he was in prison, when I went to interview him, nobody even knew what he was there for. So that is completely made up. Absolute lie. Now, did the police hire him and ask him to lie so they could get a stronger conviction? I don't know. I mean, Mike is guilty. Don't get me wrong, he's guilty, but he never discussed this case. And then here, later on during, I guess this is doing quotes, and I don't know if this was during the trial, but, so, the Superstition Mountains, who are they, who's being interviewed? So, I don't know who Hotham is, maybe he's one of the prosecutors, but they were saying they were talking to one of the Wranglers. I don't know who that is. Let's see. So they're talking to this person. And what they're saying is quote unquote, he said that they got out of the car and that Mike told her to climb down the cliff and she said she didn't want to. Then Jesse said he hit her, told her to do it, what Mike told her to do. Again, Mike never told her to walk down the mountain. Did he say where he hit her? No. Did he say how he hit her? No. Hotham asked what took place next. She started to climb down the cliff, then Mike kicked her and she fell down the cliff. Again, not what happened. So they have these people who were testifying at a trial, and I mean, it amazes me how many people will lie on the stand, right? I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing. And everybody lies. The prosecution lies, the defense lies, the witnesses lie, the perpetrators lie. Everybody lies. It's like, oh man. And then what did Jesse tell you happened after that? He told me that he went down to see if she was hurt or whatever, and when he got down there, she said, just leave me alone, I'm going to die anyway. And again, Mike did say she said that. And then it goes on, and then the Wrangler testified that he took Gillies to Suzanne's car to retrieve his belongings. But this entire book is filled with things like this that are embellished. It's not fact-based. Now that it looked like it was being transcribed from probably a court document, but a lot, like one point in here, and I think I read somewhere where Suzanne's parents did say that they felt like when they were coming in and she hadn't been there to pick them up at the airport, that they thought they saw her in her car with sitting between two men. but they didn't follow it. At first, they kind of wanted to go, wait a minute, that's Suzanne, so maybe we should go follow her, but they didn't, so they kind of have lived with guilt about that. Um, Now, whether or not that happened, I don't know. You know, I'm trying to remember, but I do think I heard her parents say that, and there's no reason for her parents to, lie about something like that. But what I do know about this case from speaking with the perpetrator firsthand is that this woman was an innocent woman. She needed help. She asked for help. These guys gave her help at first, but then they took advantage because they wanted more and they felt she had something that they could get, and they didn't mind killing her to get it. It was a brutal, horrific death that this poor woman suffered. Again, not how it's described in this book. I do not recommend this book. And again, I was writing one, and I was doing a lot of research. I spent, like, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years researching the book, reading. Like I said, I read every single document, every police document I could get my hands on. I interviewed Mike. I would not interview Jesse. No way. That man was evil personified. No, thank you. Just reading some of the things that he wrote and his like little novella. I have a copy of it somewhere. And one of these days when I find it again, I might probably do a video on it and read it for you guys, because you'll see just how twisted his brain works. But I wouldn't mess with that man. No, thank you. But, Mike at first was pretty honest with the basics of the crime, like where they were, where they took her, what they did to the poor woman, and then how she died. But it was like the surface truth of it all. And he told me that once Jesse was executed, then he would tell me the whole story because he was afraid of Jesse. And I believe he was. And because he's like, don't say anything, don't do anything, but write our story. Because I was researching him and his brother, because I'll get into that in a second. But after Jesse was executed, I went down, and I had to get special permission every single time to go down to interview him. So I jumping through hoops, going to all that, taking a 12-hour drive down to Arizona, get in there. And the moment we sit down, I'm like, okay, Mike, you said you were going to tell me the whole truth now. What? Just start from the beginning, tell me what you remember, and then I'll stop you if I have questions. And he had the gall to sit there and go, I don't remember anything. I said, excuse me? Now, I had a 2-hour visit scheduled. I just drove 12 hours to get there. Had a 2-hour visit scheduled for one day. That's all they would allow me. And he sat there and goes, I don't remember. And I said, okay. And I didn't say anything else. I got up, I walked out, and I didn't look back. I stopped everything. Because I always told him, the minute you lie to me, I'm done. And like I said, I spent years on that case, years investigating, years researching, talking to a lot of people, contacting the police officers who actually were involved in the initial investigation of the crime. I mean, I did it all, and then just to have him say that, and I'm like, wow, okay. Now, what, the other part of that, again, the other part of this book, where he touches on Robert John Logan, or Bob, everybody knew him as Bob Logan. He was in prison for killing his girlfriend, who happened to be a working girl. Anyway, they were in a hotel room, and then back then, this is kind of when hotels kind of had rugs and bedspreads and stuff. Nowadays, you don't really see any of that. But anyway, according to Bob, I asked Bob about it. And again, I read his documents as well. And his really were pretty close to his story to me was very close to what the police had written down in what was in the court documents. So I feel pretty good that he didn't lie about what he did. But anyway, they were in the room. It was morning time. He's feeling a little romantic, and he says that she laughed at him. And he, quote unquote, snapped. He killed her, rolled her up in the carpet, carried her to the dumpster, and dropped her off. And I asked him, I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you put her in a dumpster? And he said, he goes, I didn't care. She was disposable. She was trash. She laughed at me and I just got rid of her. And when I was looking at his eyes, it's like, oh, holy hell. It's like, oh my God, when you hear people say that there's nothing behind somebody's eyes, trust them when they say that. It's like, it's really weird. It's a weird experience. But anyway, the reason why I was able to get the special permission to go and interview these two men is because my mother married Bob Logan, knowing what he did, knowing his crime, knowing he's in prison for murder. I don't understand. I do not understand the women or men, I guess it happens on both sides, who write other, people in prison, and then they fall in love because they've changed and they found Jesus. And yeah, anybody can find Jesus when you're stuck in a hole, but anyway. So because my mom was married to him, I was able to get special permission. Again, Arizona has super strict rules about who can come in and who cannot, and who can be seen and who can be on a visitation list. And since I was on Bob's visitation list, I was by law not allowed to be on Mike's visitation list. So I had to petition and send them all the documented proof. Here's what I'm doing. Here's why I need to talk to him. And so it went through a whole litany of things that hoops I had to jump through to get Mike's interviews. Those 3 times, it was two or anywhere between 2 and 4. I think it's probably about 3 times. So it's a long drive from where I am to where he was, and so it was just, it's sad. I really hope one day. I think Geraldo did a good job in presenting Suzanne's, who she was as a person, and I don't think his show or that episode is available anymore. But I don't know. Ronald Watkins, I don't know what he was thinking. The story was horrible enough that he didn't have to embellish, at all. And if he couldn't get interviews with the men, then just stick with the documents. You don't have to write. I don't know. I'm just, I don't have a lot of good things to say. Again, I do not recommend this book. I think it's still for sale. I'll put a link down below just because I don't recommend it, and I know the other side of the story where Ronald Watkins does not know the other side of the story. So I see it in a much different light, but it probably would be good to get if you're into true crime, to get an understanding of who Suzanne was. I think he interviews like some of Suzanne's friends and her family, and they talk about her. But even the little bit that Mike said he knew of her, as they're dragging her around town, and not being very nice to her. He did say that she was appeared to be a very nice woman. But again, he did admit to trying to assault her, but he couldn't finish or even do anything, so he just got frustrated and, just got in the car and said, hey, let's just go to her house and rip her off. He did not throw her off the cliff. He didn't kick her off the cliff. That was Jesse. They got out of the car. They're driving. Mike said they drove for quite a while up and down the road just trying to find some place to. He knew what Jesse was going to do. And he didn't try to stop it. He admits it. He goes, yeah, I knew. I didn't try to stop any of it. But once they found a spot, and it wasn't into some dark abyss and thinking no, they knew it was about a 40-foot drop. They threw her over, heard her still moaning, went down, and then as she's laying there, she's saying, please just leave me alone. And they're now looking for rocks, and they start piling rocks on top of her body. She can't move. She wasn't getting up. She couldn't move. And as they're piling them on, and she's slowly can't breathe, and she's like, just leave me alone. I'm going to die anyway. And Jesse did say, yeah, you damn right you are, you bitch. Something along those lines. And then the last thing that Mike said, that the last rock that they put on top of her, they both had to carry it. It was that heavy. They took it then and put it on top of her chest, and they could hear her struggling to breathe, and they turned and walked away and left her. Horrible, 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 horrible crime. Very horrible men, and some of that truth is in this book. Not a lot, but some of that truth is here. So that's today's story, Evil Intentions. It's about Mike Logan, Jesse Gillies, and Robert John Logan and his other crime. And if you want to read about it, you can pick it up, because like I said, I do believe this is the only book written on the case. So, but understand, if you pick this book up, take it with a grain of salt when it comes to what supposedly happened, what Mike and Jesse supposedly said and did, because 90% of what he writes in this book is fabricated. It is not true. So, I mean, again, it's bad enough what these guys did. Stick with the truth. Don't embellish. So, hope you guys have a good day.